Neighbors cut down my tree. I believe my neighbor has cut down a tree on my property. We have had minor issues since we bought our home. Our one neighbor owns the property his home is on, as well as the rest of that side of the street. He'd own the entire side of the street if he had our lot as well. He tried to buy when it went up for sale, but he was offering a small amount just for the land. We bought the house as a fixer-upper home to live in and hopefully start our family. Neighbors' dogs used to end up in our yard, which wasn't really an issue till we got our own dog, when I finally had to say something. The dogs haven't been back on our property, but we haven't been friendly since this incident. One morning in 2021, we came outside to find them putting up a fence. I was confused, as I thought they were actually erecting the fence on my property, but I realized I wasn't 100% sure, so I had a survey done. They were in the right with their fence, but I was glad to have a better understanding of my area. They actually disagreed with the survey and asked who we used, and then had a survey done by a different company. They never said anything about it to us, so I assumed that we were in agreement about the property line. However, there is one area, now the area in contention, where they actually pulled up the wooden stake and tossed it aside after a week or so, but it was in an unsightly area. And while it's not okay to move the actual metal markers, I guess it's okay to remove the wooden stakes, so I didn't think much of it. The property line is clear till this point, where there's a small group of trees and saplings, and then there's the driveway, which they have an easement for, which allows use of 75 square feet of my yard. This easement is where I think we are having confusion. It seems they think it extends further back than it does, or I don't understand how the line travels from that point to the front of the lot. Back in August of this year, we had an arborist out to quote cutting down a few trees. He was also going to trim a tree that was seemingly on my property, but leaning over my neighbor's driveway pretty extensively. While the arborist and I were talking, my neighbor's wife came out and ranted at me and the arborist to cut it all down. Please, cut it all down. I've never spoken to this woman, so I was just kind of taken aback. I laughed and she went away, and me and the arborist continued talking. We have had some personal issues pop up, so we had to postpone getting the arborist back out, but plan to schedule something for the future. Before we could do this, a few weeks ago now, my wife received a message on social media from my neighbor's wife, saying basically, we are renting a lathe and chopping a chunk of that tree that leans over our driveway. Not sure whose property it's on, just letting you know. It struck me as odd that she was saying she doesn't know whose tree it is, as we have each had a survey done. But since she was saying they were cutting a chunk of the tree hanging over their driveway, it sounded to me like they were just trimming their side, so I wasn't too concerned. Wife replied, "Oh yeah, do whatever. We had been meaning to get an arborist out, just had some personal stuff pop up." She replied that she was sorry to hear that and maybe we would want to toss them some money for the lathe and they could help us out. The trees I need cut are leaning toward my house or growing through a chain link fence, so I really want an actual arborist to do the work, so we just said that we'd think about it. I came home from work that night to discover that my neighbor had clear cut a small group of saplings as well as 2 full-growth trees. One full tree seems to have been on my property as well as a couple of saplings. He did the work himself. He owns a construction and landscaping company. If I thought this was an honest mistake, that would be one thing, but we have both had surveys done and he owns a business where he deals with this kind of thing. So I feel like he knows how big of a deal it is to do this and just thinks that we won't retaliate because we're poor. I keep saying it appears the tree is on my property. The lot lines are very clear until this small patch of trees that he cut down. There's an easement allowing them to use 75 square feet of my yard for their driveway. This tree area is on the property line and the easement stops before it. The full-growth trees they cut were side by side with it, looking to me like one was on my side and one was on his side. I spoke with an arborist friend in another state, and he said that I should contact a lawyer and possibly file a police report. I've contacted my surveyor to have him come out and confirm the lines for me, but that'll cost me $400 when I've already spent $2,000 on a survey. I have some calls in to a couple of lawyers who deal with real estate stuff, wondering if anyone has any advice or anything that I should gather before heading to the lawyer. I assume confirming the plot lines will be the first step. Also, I didn't intend to give them permission to cut down any trees on our property, but we did tell them to do whatever in response to them saying that they'd be cutting a chunk of one tree. It's in writing as it's social media, so I think it's clear we meant do whatever in regards to them trimming the one tree, but will that end up biting me in the butt? Not sure this is worth suing over. I don't want to blow up the neighborhood, but I also don't want this guy to walk all over us. Like I said, I thought if this were some honest mistake, I'd feel differently, but I really think this is just a case of my neighbor deciding he was going to do whatever he felt like. Do I have options aside from taking him to court? Was considering having the lawyer just send a letter explaining that I will take action if he does anything else. I don't want to blow up my neighborhood, but I'm just not sure what else to do here. Do you agree with this? Your neighbor committed a crime. He removed the survey stakes and cut down trees on your property. Call the township zoning officer and the police. It's a crime to remove the property marker placed in the ground by a surveyor. That's destruction of property. And moving a boundary marker, big fines in New Jersey, it could be jail time and a $25,000 fine. I wonder if OP has the ground to stand on where he said do whatever, but look, the other guy just literally broke the law. What would you do? Would you lawyer up? Do everything to keep a salesman from selling? Okay, let's see how that works out for your boss. Posted by Anonymous B315. In college, I worked for a computer parts store in their build your own section. Let's call this place Macro Point. I was a good seller and made a ton of money, something like $2,400 a check. I was very happy and feeling myself. I even bought a shirt that said DJ Breadwinner and would wear it under my nice clothes all the time. The job was easy if you follow two simple rules. 1. Never sell them something they don't need, and 2. The customer only has the options you give them. The latter seems a bit disingenuous, but if you follow 1, you'll never go wrong with 2. My 2 biggest abilities were that A, I helped everyone and was very polite and energetic, so I got a lot of repeat customers who would wait and deal only with me, and B, I could sell warranties like nobody's business. The warranties were easy to sell since we had an accidental damage plan on most items and one that replaced components in a build if you paid us to build it. I would simply say something like, you want to buy the accidental damage plan? It may be expensive, but it lasts 3 years. Put that date in your phone, on your calendar, a week before it's up, throw this son up against the wall, and then come get the latest model for free. The plan says they might ask a few questions, but the truth is they didn't. With accidental damage, bring in a broke item, get the same, or if that's not available, usually not, get the latest price equivalent model. Most people took that bet, and I was successful. Things were great until we got a new manager for our department. We'll call him Incompetito. He was, as his name implies, incompetent. He had come over from Circuit Metropolis and had been a store manager or something. Their business had just folded. He brought all kinds of new and stupid ideas to the department. The worst was switching how we did the cleaning and stocking. Before, we cleaned at night and stocked periodically in the early morning when it was slow when the truck came. Incompetito wanted us to clean in the morning, so we were on the floor for the early morning customers and then stock at night, because anything that wasn't fully stocked in our department through the day went up when we merchandised at night and cleaned. I think he was just trying to stop us from getting overtime or something, which was stupid because we made like $5 an hour plus commission. Our hourly wage was crap. The biggest problem here is that the things off the truck are in the system, so when a customer wants something, the system says we have it and it's not on the shelf. We have to waste time not being on the floor, going to look for things in the pallets, and that hurts our sales. This is a completely stupid idea that failed spectacularly, and I earned the ire of Incompetito by going to the store manager after our objections were ignored and explaining it. I may have earned his undying ire when he told the store manager that was the way they did it back at Circuit Metropolis, and I remarked that was probably why they went out of business. In my defense, screw Incompetito, he was costing me like $500 a check. Eventually, this got fixed, but a new issue started, and this one was really annoying. Now, we were not allowed to sell in other departments unless they were connected to or upsells on our builds. TV, Apple, games, and general section in the middle of the store. I and others had mastered upselling whole TVs instead of monitors and gaming peripherals and all that. We got a higher percentage of peripherals than core sales, so making a TV a peripheral was big money. Incompetito, who was trying to buddy up to the hot chick who ran the department, had forbid us to upsell TVs or hand that off as a separate thing for the TV people. This did not go over well in our department. As the lead salesman in my department, I was particularly PO'd, but he threatened write-ups for anyone who disobeyed, and the store manager was tired of us going around Incompetito, so he just started saying it's his department. He eventually forbade us from upselling anywhere else in the store. I'm like, cool, bet. Cue the malicious Compliance. You see, even if it's from other departments, if the sale starts in our department, the numbers are attributed to our department. This here affects Incomposito's bonus, but also the only reason more TVs were being sold in the first place was that we were convincing gamers to get big TVs and use them as monitors instead of monitors. So when we stopped doing that, units stopped going out with the same frequency and the numbers for our department dropped sharply. It was actually rough to get all the salespeople to just stick to our department and not go around Incomposito, but it only took about 2 months for anyone to start noticing the problem. They called a meeting of the departments and we talked about the TV and the BOIO underperforming. When they asked why, I feigned ignorance and just said we were following what Incomposito said. We let the store manager slowly piece together why things were happening. Incomposito got chewed out and TV lady, let's call her Legs for Days, was also chewed out. We didn't know why at first, but apparently she'd done this to the manager before the manager that hired me. The one before Incomposito was a woman, but her predecessor was a man. Apparently, Legs for Days had a way of flirting and getting special treatment for her department and taking advantage of idiots like Incomposito. I'd like to say that this was the end and Incomposito eased up and got out of the way, but nah, he was petty and a jerk. He conspired with Snake, someone of his own culture, to get rid of me. I found this out because Snake was popular with the girls, but also talked too much. He would allow Snake to upsell in our area and had one of the girls often remove my sticker and put Snake's on it. He started scheduling me at weird times and started selling the store manager on the idea that I was detrimental to the morale of the department. A lot of them were lazy and relied on the pool. And when you don't help someone and then they buy something, the money goes into the pool and it's distributed amongst the entire department. If it doesn't look like it's a big bill, then some folks would just let go to the pool. I did not. I helped everyone and turned small items into big purchases. Admittedly, that hurt everyone else's pockets, but we were told to help everyone and to absolutely not be lazy and let things go to the pool. So the weird way it ended up being explained to me is that if I sold 10 of an item, I got paid, let's say, $100 because of a multiplier or whatever. But if I sold 5 and then someone else sold 5, no one would get the multiplier, and then thus they would just pay each $40 or something instead of paying the $100 for the same amount of merch being sold. It was all convoluted and sounded like a BS excuse, but Incomposito ended up convincing them that they couldn't afford me right then. Normally they fire people on the spot because we've got a high risk of theft, but they let me work those last 2 weeks. I asked what he expected me to do, and they told me, I expect you to sell. So, sell I did. Cue malicious compliance too. I was going to show them what they were losing. I wanted them to feel my absence. I was determined to try and break the sales record my last few days and totally came close. I was averaging something like $7,800 in sales, way up from my $3,000 a day, which still had me around the best of the best. See, the record was somewhere around $14,000 in a day, and I had hit $11,000 and $13,000, but sadly could not hit the record. But my numbers were insane during that time. My last check was stupid high. But alas, Incomposito did manage to get me out of there, though store manager said he'd hire me back if things changed. Instead, Incomposito waited a month and moved Snake into my place in the department. Needless to say, their numbers were not the same. I didn't get my closure on this until about 4 months later when I found Incomposito and store manager had been fired. They opened a Bengal Direct across the way and MacroPoint had been losing clients and money. Worse, apparently my department hadn't really recovered from my loss. Things came to a head at a quarterly meeting when the regional manager came to present the top sales awards, and apparently I'd won it, even missing 2 months or so of sales. No one had told him I'd been fired, so he looked like an idiot trying to present the reward. There was a banner and everything. I also found out that Snake got fired for 2 separate offenses: stealing, which they were investigating, and then doing stuff with one of the cashiers in the back, which led to his immediate termination. It had come out that Incomposito had caught Snake before doing something inappropriate and just gave him a vague write-up. That, the debacle with me, and the low sales got Incomposito fired. I received a call to see if I wanted to come back, but I already taken on extra classes by then. I Don't Work Here, Lady, Strip Club Edition, posted by Nemanev. This takes us back to the early 2000s. I was 19 at the time. My second job ever was at a shady accountant's office. I worked a couple years as a courier and then was promoted to a small administrative role. It was a small office, but we handled a lot of work because we had a lot of clients. Our biggest was a chain store, big store, with headquarters overseas. We did the numbers for the local branches. This meant that big store would send a couple of times per year a representative that will stay a couple of days in a hotel, so we'd have to show them a nice time in town. One of these representatives, VIP, was a bit of a creep and demanded to go to nightclubs where we had to make sure he didn't get in trouble. Our country was always in the middle of an economic crisis, so the accountant would make us go above and beyond to keep the representatives happy and, in the case of this guy, drunk. During one of the VIP's visits, he heard of a strip club and wanted to go there at all cost. One of my coworkers took him there, and VIP liked it so much that he practically never left the establishment. I don't know why, but he decided this would be the place of operations next time he'd come, and he managed to make sure a next visit would ensue as soon as possible. So a couple months later he came, with short notice, and arranged with accountant to have their meetings at the strip club. Mind you, this was still during working hours. Sorry for the long background. Now to the I don't work here lady part. This went down during a meeting at said strip club at noon. The cast is me, VIP, accountant, accountant's personal assistant, drunk patrons 1, 2, and 3, and bouncer. We were sitting in one of the corner tables, away from most of the action. It was actually a pretty quiet place, all things considered, and given the nature of the talk, ill accounting practices, it surprisingly seemed like a good place. There were a few patrons next to the stage, and there was little action, but there were dancers coming and going. It seemed like the place never closed. Accountant's personal assistant was a girl in her mid-20s. She was the accountant's niece, and she was both incredibly smart and beautiful. She was sitting next to her uncle, taking notes and providing data on demand. I was there just to make sure VIP always had a drink in hand. At some point, I was handed some documents to check something out, and the assistant went to the bar to get more drinks. So the three males were sitting at our table, VIP and accountant talking figures, as I was checking the papers, when suddenly we heard a loud crash and some yelling. We turned to see the assistant arguing with drunk patron 1, her white shirt all wet. She then threw a punch at patron 1's face, who was rocked back by the vicious hit and the surprise. 2 and 3, who were nearby, jumped in and tried to grab the assistant. We sprang from our seats and rushed to her aid. There was some pushing and pulling, and the accountant was trying to hold the assistant back and shield her, but she was enraged. VIP and I were pushing the drunk patrons back. Fortunately, the fighting was contained between the assistant and patron 1, and a full-blown skirmish didn't break out. A couple of seconds later, a massive 6'8" bouncer appeared, grabbed patron 1, and started bellowing out orders. We instantly stopped, as if we were toddlers under the command of a kindergarten teacher. Upon questioning, patron 1 said that the expletive refused to serve him a drink and a lap dance, pointing at the assistant. Still enraged, she started shouting and things almost escalated again, weren't it for the bouncer being so menacingly in control. The man was good at his job. Eventually, assistant calmed down and said that she was returning from the bar with a tray with drinks, when patron 1 slapped her in the butt and told her to take him to a private booth. She said she didn't work there. He slurred something about being quick about it, and when she tried to leave, he tried to grab for her chest and knock the tray with drinks all over her suit and shirt. She told her something along the lines of, "I told you I don't work here, a-hole," and he replied, "Well, you look like a garden utensil that works here." She lost it and started swinging. In the aftermath, patron 1 was kicked out. 2 and 3 left with his friend. VIP paid the bartender some money to allow us to stay there. I took the assistant in a cab back to her home. Assistant was still fuming and ranted on how she hated working for her uncle and his shady clients. She wanted to quit and start working in her field. She was an architect, but our economy was so depressed that there was hardly any work there. She took a week off work after that, and during that week, I decided to quit. I was a high school dropout, and I thought it was a good time to get graduated. So I haven't seen her since. I learned that accountant was caught stealing from big client a couple years later, and his business declined heavily after losing a majority of his business. A couple years ago, I've seen assistant running a somewhat successful Instagram account giving interior design tips and offering her services as an architect and designer. She seems to be doing okay. The strip club closed a long time ago, so I guess the drunk patrons are getting their fill elsewhere. Karen thinks she owns my property. I make her regret messing with me. Click the video on your screen. You don't want to miss a fallout of this one, and I'll see you there.